strong gender, Amazons of the Great Steppe. An Oriental woman is gentle, graceful, modest. She creates that special atmosphere of a home. We used to think that way. However, there were times when the weaker part of society fought side by side with the men, rallied their own parties, and conquered the land. They were steppe furies, nomadic women of legendary cruelty. In today's episode, you'll find out what Amazons of the Great Steppe were like. Why you shouldn't stand in the way of the Amazons.
Именно женщины.
Women, when they fought in very reckless and aggressive ways. So many people were afraid of them. Even now, when women fight, it's terrible. They have no tactics. They fight like animals. What was it? Cruel traditions or magical rituals? Myth or reality? He also writes that they burned their right breasts in childhood. Who are the modern Amazons? You had to defend your land, your family, protect the honor of your country, and maybe even your loved ones. And there was no guarantee you'll make it home alive. Everybody was ready to die.
Imagine a cavalry or an infantry, thousands of units made up entirely of women. According to historians, not many enemies actually dared to fight this force. Sheer cruelty, unpredictability, fighting skills of these female steppe warriors ignited fears in the heart of those enemies. And the stories of their victories spread far beyond the borders of the Kazakh land. Who were these women living in this Eurasian steppe centuries ago? I'm Besedin, professor of sociology from Australia, and you're watching Searching for Mystery.
Amazons is the word that we most often associate with the female warriors. The term Amazons could theoretically be derived from the Iranian Hamazan, that stood for warriors. The similar sounding Greek words, Amazos, are roughly translated as breasted. There are many theories on that. One thing is clear. These women were no less courageous than male warriors. The stunt director, actor, founder of the nomadic stunts group, Jibek Joly, knows the difference between the technique and tactics of the battle of the warriors of that era.
Изучали японских.
We studied Japanese examples. Girls also fought in Japan. They tucked their breasts with clothes so that they would not interfere with shooting or fighting. The circumstances were so extreme that they needed their armor to stay flat. Sometimes they made themselves look like men when attacking in the evening, because that's how they caused more damage. There's also a very common version that the word Amazons is derived from the Greek expression amazos, and is a negative prefix, so it would mean without breasts. Even before AD, philosopher and historian Strabo wrote in his Geographica, all from childhood burned their right chests in order to use their hands more freely during various evolutions, and especially by throwing a spear.
However, in antique paintings, Amazons are always portrayed with a pair of breasts, while one is covered with clothes, the other one is naked. Many legends and chronicles say that Amazons actually cut off their right breast or even burned it with hot coals in order to use a bow better. Allegedly, this procedure was done with the girls at the age of 3.
Culturologist Verdali Ospan says that Herodotus, ancient Greek historian and philosopher, also mentioned them.
Он также пишет, что им в детстве выжигали.
He also writes that they burned their right breasts in childhood. What for? So it would stay out of the way when you pulled a bowstring. You know, it could be true. We can tell from our point of view how cruel it was or something like that. But those were other times. We can't tell for sure whether it was myth or reality, but no matter how strange this may sound to us now, we have to admit that female warriors were in great demand at all times and on all continents. For instance, King Chandragupta Maurya, who in the united part of India into centralized state, in 300 BC, had a highly unusual bodyguard, a giant Greek woman. Nearly 2,000 years later, rulers of disunited Indian states, such as Nizams of Hyderabad, used a similar practice. It is known that a small army of female archers guarded the royal family of Kandy in Sri Lanka.
Стрельба из лука, знаете, она нужна выдержка, и женщины очень хорошо стреляют.
You need endurance for archery, and women are sharpshooters. Why? Because they have endurance. Men got angry and aggressive there. They got a violent temper, they started shooting on sight. But women, they used tactics. When they were shooting in a more synchronous way. Even nowadays, let's take sports. A lot of our girls are very good at archery. This is a distinctive characteristic of a woman, a characteristic of a female body. Women, as mothers protecting their children, could do everything. In Europe, Celtic and Germanic women often fought alongside their husbands. The Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus says that there were more women than men in the army of Boudica, the legendary queen of the Iceni tribe that led Britain to rise up against the Romans in 60 BC. In Nordic countries, a woman with no family could take up arms and become the so-called maiden with a shield, as a curious custom.
While studying this subject, I found a lot of examples of this kind. Despite the superstition of women on the ship, in the 18th and 19th century, it was not unusual for women to sail with their husbands on French and British warships. The women would help. They would extinguish fires, bring the powder to the guns, and help the naval surgeons.
Murat Abdirov, professor, doctor of historical sciences, chief researcher of the Institute of History and Ethnology, named after Walihanow, knows the results of the excavations in present-day Kazakhstan very well. The Institute of History and Ethnology, named after Shohan Walihanow. Archaeologists find tombs with the women's bones and weaponry. There were no, let's say, jewelry or toys, just weapons, like those of men. Hence the conclusion that the Amazons existed. They even were among the troops of Alexander the Great. They mainly come from the Sakas, from nomadic people. Hence, they were the Amazons. We studied the matriarchal society that had a separate caste of warriors, young female warriors. You know that we have a lot of female athletes with strong characters now. And they actually fought. Even now we know that girls still play kokpar, even if we don't let them or tell them it's inappropriate. In fact, they could fight once, it was possible to put their lives on the line, but now they can't even play kokpar. I think it's wrong. In those days, there was a very special tradition. I also want to say that Saka women were freer than women of other ethnicities. Sarmatian women also stood out. Sarmatian women could even become elders of clans or tribes. They fought together with men, went hunting, they wore the same clothes, carried the same weapons. They even had a law. A Saka girl wasn't allowed to marry until she killed an enemy. Only after she proved her worth, strength, and courage, she could choose a husband for herself. They women are warlike, like themselves. They shoot arrows and ride horses like men. They seem to be even more courageous than men in combat, because sometimes when men turn around, women are not running at all, but go to extreme danger, wrote Friar Julian about the Mongols in the 13th century. Herodotus also mentioned that women were warriors. This concept pervades history, from the Saka to our day. We can watch it through history, you know? In The Path of Abai, the author describes a female character named Kulke. Having learned that their cattle were being stolen from them, she was the first to jump on a horse and chase the thieves with a spear.
Back then, the women's power was not limited just to Han's HQ. In the homes of ordinary nomads, their opinions were decisive in the majority of urgent matters. And you can tell that from the epic poems where you have bright and strong female characters. This is also evidenced by the steppe mausoleums erected over the tombs of ancestresses and just beloved women.
One of the most controversial and perhaps unintentionally overlooked female warriors in the history of Kazakhstan is Queen Zarina. So here's what we know about Zarina. Many people, Persians for example, consider her their ancestress. Well, all nomadic people assume that her country was in southern Turkmenistan. Apparently, it means that they have a cult of Zarina there. But given that the territory of Kazakhstan was owned by Sakas, we also think of her as our common ancestress. Zarina was born in the 4th century BC, a family of noble Saka leaders. Her father was the ruler of the Masagetan tribe. Translated from the ancient Turkic language, Zarina stands for golden or precious. According to tradition, it was the name given to the most desired and awaited children in the family. Yofrat Imambek, candidate of sciences, social anthropologist, UNESCO expert in intangible cultural heritage, has his own opinion on this matter.
Что касается царицы Зарины, я сомневаюсь, насколько она относится к... что она действительно относится.
As for Queen Zarina, I doubt to what extent she really belongs to a nomadic Turkic civilization. Because the name Zarina is usually, it's a Persian name. Zar means a care. Yes, there's a root, zar, like in the Russian word, zarya, which means dawn. Zarya and Zarina, they're the words of the same root. These are Persian borrowings. Therefore, I cannot say much about her as the Turkic leader.
В качестве тюркской.
The names of the closest associates of Queen Zarina also remain in history. For example, she had a personal bodyguard named Konsolu, who allegedly, at the age of 12, led a detachment of 100 soldiers. Zarina's chief military advisor was also a woman by the name of Arna.
Ну, ее правильное имя Зариния. Это просто современная Зарина.
Zarina, well, her real name was Zarinia. Zarina is a modern misnomer. She was a Saka queen. She lived about the 5th or 4th century BC. Unfortunately, we have only Persian and Greek sources from that ancient era. Persians had different uniform tablets and inscriptions, and the Greeks, such as Herodotus, the father of history, the author of a great work, Strabo, the father of geography, let's say, that's yes, Pliny, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, and others. In short, the sources are all foreign, not Saka. And the Sakas had a cuneiform script that differed from the Persian and Greek ones. However, we have very limited information on the subject. At the age of 16, Zarina was married to Kidrei, the ruler of the Saka tribal union, which included the Masagera, Paragraya, Tigrahauda, and Hamavarga. This was a difficult period as the Medes attempted to take over the territories inhabited by the Saka tribes for many years.
King Kidrei waged a war against them. According to Saka traditions, Zarina was always by her husband's side and fought courageously with the enemies. When Kidrei died in one of the fiercest battles, Zarina took the place as the ruler of the Saka tribes.
After the death of her first husband, she married the Parthian king Mermer. Well, it was an era of warriors in general. The Persians waged wars, the Greeks waged wars, then the Romans waged wars. It was the age of conquest as a whole. Zarina allied herself with the Parthians and married their king Mermer in order to secure enough resources to defeat Media. However, contrary to a commonly accepted practice, she made an agreement with her husband that she would rule Saka tribes independently.
Она вот сакская царица, ну, ареал проживания ее Средняя Азия.
So she was a Saka queen. Well, her domain was in Central Asia, let's say so. In Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Persia, somewhere in that region. So after the death of her husband, she married the Parthian king Mermer. However, since she was a queen and an Amazon, she was always involved in the war, in one of the wars with the neighboring state of Media. It means she dressed up as a man and she was armed. During the battle, the Median king, Strangius, allegedly hit her with a spear. She fell and he saw that she was a woman. Apparently, her helmet fell off. Her hair came loose, so he let her live. That's Strangius. This means that it was the first mention of Zarina who took part in this war.
Которая участвовала в этой войне.
After the defeat of the Medes, the conflict in the struggle for power among the spouses started to grow, and Zarina killed Mermer in a confrontation. According to legend, she said, Mermer is my husband, but my people and my country have more value in my eyes. But there's another theory.
И в этой войне царь медийцы Стриангей попадает в плен.
During that war, Strangius, the king of Media, was captured by the Parthians. He met Zarina and recognized her from that time on the battlefield. And well, as the sources claim, they fell in love with each other. So her husband, the king of Parthia, Mermer, sentenced Strangius, the king of the Medes, to death. Zarina begged for mercy on him since in the first battle he didn't kill her after he found out she was a woman. So she asked her husband to have mercy upon him, but he was adamant, since Strangius was an enemy and a fool, therefore he had to be executed. And well, today we have a legend that Zarina, recalling the nobility of Strangius, who spared her, released all the imprisoned Medes, who were captured with a king, and as the Greek authors say, killed Mermer and freed Strangius. Supposedly, Strangius wanted to marry her, but Zarina, as a noblewoman, told him, you have a wife, Aritea, waiting for you at home. I grant you life, so get back to your wife.
Я дарую тебе жизнь, поэтому возвращайся к своей супруге.
There's also a version according to which, in rejecting Strangius, Zarina was motivated by love to her people. The queen realized that by entering into this marriage, her soldiers would take part in the future conquest of Media, and many of them would die in bloody battles. Therefore, she continued to rule alone. Zarina found some cities. People had proper settlements. They were engaged in agriculture. There was a tradition. In the spring, the king of the Saka made the first furrow with the plow, and only after that everyone else followed.
As a wise ruler, Zarina realized the importance of trade in development. Therefore, she founded Roxanak, a large town on the banks of Sirdarya River, which later continued to exist as Saganak.
In general, her biography is bound up with legend so much that it is difficult to determine where the truth is and where the fiction is. According to existing information, the thankful Sakas buried the queen in a pyramid mound, each side of which was 690 meters long. Unfortunately, we don't know where the remains of the great queen are buried.
Конечно, находятся курганы, очень много курганов.
Sure, we find Saka mounds. There are many Saka mounds, but they do not have any inscription indicating who lies there. Generally, the set of findings is standard. They're weapons. Either male or female mounds contain bronze or iron weapons. Bow, arrows, quivers, protective armor, and so on. But determining that a mount is Zarina's tomb is nearly impossible now, I would say.
According to researchers, the first detachments of Saka Amazon started to form under the rule of Zarina. 12, 13-year-old girls were recruited and trained in military skills. Archery and the use of lance were mandatory subjects. Later, Zarina actually issued a decree that all girls had to go through military training before they were allowed to marry.
Those military detachments were still there after Zarina died. Tomiris was part of one of them too. Now she's much more popular than Zarina. Her name is known almost all over the world. It was about Tomiris. She was a great warrior, and we're proud of her. She was a big warrior born in Kazakhstan. This is cool.
Masagitai warrior and Queen Tomiris came into history as a courageous and wise fighter. She succeeded in defeating Persian leader Cyrus the Great, thereby bringing peace to her people.
In reprisal for the murder of her son, she put the head of the Persian king, whom she had defeated, in a bag full of blood while saying, "Though I saw you and defeated you in battle, you caused me much sorrow in taking away my son, so I drowned you in blood, just like I warned you." Women, when they fought in very reckless and aggressive ways, so many people were afraid of them. Even now, when women fight, it's terrible. They have no tactics. They fight like animals. But at that time, Tomiris came up with a tactical scheme, and people know a lot about Tomiris. People from all over the world know her. They know that she stopped Cyrus thanks to her intelligence, tactics, and strength. The film Tomiris, released in 2019, has renewed interest in her personality.
Тактики и силе. Именно по каким-то фрескам.
We did our work in accordance with some frescoes and rough descriptions, and we were preparing for the shooting of Tomiris. All the research took 6 months. We were studying the types of bronze daggers and swords and its materials. It was very interesting.
Интересно вообще.
No matter how historians argue about which nation or which tribe she came from, the fact remains that this fearless, wise, and strong woman decided the fates of the people. But what is it like to be an Amazon in the modern world? Aida Kurbanova, the member of the Nomad Stance group, speaks about her work in historical films.
Если говорить о представлении женщины-воина прошлых веков, то...
If we talk about an image of a woman as a warrior of past centuries, then before our eyes we have a picture of a desperate woman who is overwhelmed with pain, overwhelmed with despair, filled with anger. In those times, enemies came, stole their cattle, killed their husbands or their sons, and took their daughters and possessions. And this woman, she was overwhelmed with emotions. Imagine her glassy-eyed stare full of pain and a sword in her hands. And of course, all devils would break loose. To this day, they say that hell hath no fury like a woman offended. Well, these are not mere words. Nothing changed over the centuries. Offend any woman, and she will bring your demise. Some things have not changed. It's just that methods have changed. And then in those times, they used a bow, a spear, and a sword.
Раньше было лук, копье, меч.
In fact, modern stunt women, by choosing this occupation, gain the skills to succeed in a professional field. For women in ancient times, it was all about survival.
Нас именно обучают фехтованию.
We learned fencing, sword fencing, saber fencing, like that, yeah. These and archery, axes, spears, we all know how to handle them. They teach you to fence, they teach you to fight, they teach you to ride horses, not just to ride, but to perform all tricks. They teach you to punch.
There is a Kazakh proverb, I thank the salt for giving taste to food. I thank a woman for uniting people. I think this speaks volume about Kazakh's attitude towards women.
Besides husbands, fathers and brothers, women participated in the struggle against the Jungars. Aytulkun, the daughter of Sultan Abulay Isinbake, daughter of Karasay Batır, Aybike, daughter of Bulunbay Batır, and many others. It is well known that Gauhar, the wife of the Kabanbay Batır, even led a scouting party. Female Batyrs existed until the notorious barefooted flight. For example, sister of Malay Sari Batır was a wife of Kabanbay Batır. Am I right? Well, she was a match for him. She participated in all major battles. Stories about her are often intertwined with legends. So one of them has that in one of the battles, Gauhar brought wild camels onto the battlefield, and they saw confusion and panic among the Jungars. So the Kazakhs succeeded in winning that battle. After becoming a mother, Gauhar sent Nazım, her eldest daughter, to war.
Bapay, the wife of Han Abul Khair, was known for high intellect, strong character, and independence in her judgments and actions. She actually worked closely with her husband on the most important political issues. Today, she is regarded as the first female politician in Kazakhstan.
It is impossible not to mention Kulan Khanim, the fourth wife of Genghis Khan. Historians recognize that among the many wives of Genghis Khan, she was the wisest. The great conqueror listened to Kulan's advice until his very death. People will never forget the exploits of the three Kazakh women who demonstrated unprecedented heroism during the Great Patriotic War. They went voluntarily to war and fought for their motherland alongside men. Hiwas Daspanova became the first Kazakh female pilot, while machine gunner Manshuk Mametova and sniper Aliya Moldagulova became heroes of the Soviet Union.
Если посмотреть казахскую историю, то женщины всегда были воинами. Они были воинами, когда надо.
When you look at the history of Kazakhstan, women have always been warriors. They were warriors when it was needed and it was not needed. They were always men, you know? Now is another time. Now, the girls are no longer required to kill the enemy. But it doesn't mean girls can't get into a military service in our country. That's a matter of will and choice. We even have women pilots. We have women pilots in the armed forces. We had Toti Amirova, the first female pilot in command, as far as I remember. And there's a movie, Night Witches, yes? That's the name, I guess, we had. Hiwas Daspanova, no? She underwent several surgical interventions on her broken legs, and so on. But she returned to the service.
Women continue to serve in the military of many nations. However, probably not all women can picture themselves with a lance in their hand on a horse unless it's part of an exotic photo shoot. In those days, women had no choice.
Там была другая ситуация. Там был вопрос жизни и смерти.
There was another situation. It was a life or death issue. That is, either kill or be killed. Things were serious. You had to defend your land, your family, protect the honor of your country, and maybe even your loved ones. And there was no guarantee you'd make it home alive. It was a feeling when you became aware it was up to you what would happen next.
Что будет потом?
On top of all, the heroines of the Great Steppe simultaneously fulfilled an important mission of pacification and creation amidst internal and major wars. They had succeeded in reducing the destructive aspect of hard times.
Лев Гумилев, например, говорит, что раньше тюрки, когда издалека приезжали, они в первую очередь здоровались.
Lev Gumilev, for example, says that the Turkic people, when they came from far away, they first greeted their mothers, you know? We say motherland, atan ana. We also say that heaven is at the mother's feet, not at the father's feet. Our native language is called ana tele, mother tongue. You see, our attitude towards women is very distinct. Speaking in the words of today, we idolize them. The notes of the travelers of these years attest to the high position of the women of the steppe. In this region, I have seen miracles when it comes to the great honor with which they surround the women. They're more respected than men, wrote the Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited the Kipchak steppes in the 14th century, and described the customs of the court of the Khan Uzbek in Gold Court. Kazakh women used to be always free. You know that at the first we weren't Muslims, we were Tengrists. Then we converted to Islam. You just need to look at the history that we had and appreciate it as it. Because there were times, there's a history and it did happen. You can't change it. But if we respect history, then we'll have a future. If we don't respect history, we'll have no future. And don't say that women were depressed, that it didn't happen, and that they didn't do things. That's absurd. You need to go back in time and stay there then.
They say a woman rocks a cradle with one hand and the world with the other. Now, every nation has great female leaders and fighters. And I think there's a reason why, from history, a famous image of Themis, a symbol of justice, is a woman holding a sword in her hand. I'm Besedin. It was Searching for Mystery, and I'll see you next time.